I was not born Jewish. I was born to an evangelical Christian family, not just any evangelical Christian family. My father was a Assemblies of God minister, fundamentalist Christian. From a young age, I was taught to be a missionary. Jews are definitely prioritized. The Bible was like an absolutely divine word of God, absolute truth. So to find out that my Bible had been messed with, that mistranslated, things taken out of context, and the betrayal in that was huge.
Shannon Newson. At one point in her life, she was a missionary. She was practically converting Jews to Christianity until she figured out, oh man, maybe they're right. This is her story, how she came to that realization, how her entire life changed. Well, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Where are you coming from, first of all? And you're here for the weekend, right?
I'm here for the weekend for Project Inspire.
Yeah.
From Israel.
So you live in Israel now?
Very cool. Do, for the last 10 years.
Amazing.
It's fine. Are we started already?
Yeah, we're in, yeah. Oh. So I want to, I guess, talk to you about your upbringing. It's something that you lecture around the world about, and you do some pretty cool work that I've seen sort of firsthand in different scenarios. Tell me what your upbringing was like.
I was not born Jewish. I was born to an evangelical Christian family, not just any evangelical Christian family. My father was a Assemblies of God minister, fundamentalist Christian. From a young age, I was taught to be a missionary. The word evangelize is in the movement itself. Evangelical, the teachings of evangelical Christianity have a very world focus, but Jews are definitely prioritized.
To meaning like to go make them Christian.
Right.
When you said Assembly of God minister, what does that mean? Because I imagine a lot of people, including me, are not really super familiar with what that looks like.
There are thousands of denominations in the Christian world and thousands of denominations in the evangelical world. Assemblies of God is one of the largest, fastest growing denominations in evangelical Christianity. Spirit-filled, the speaking in tongues, the Pentecostal version, very committed and dedicated to evangelizing, and very much Christian Zionists, supportive of Israel.
So your father was like, he was like a Rosh Hashiva, so to speak, in that world. Like he was high up, he was high ranking.
In that, he was a minister. He had his own church for a while, but he was mostly like a traveling evangelist. He would speak at other churches or an associate pastor for a church for a while. I grew up in a couple of different denominations, all within evangelical Christianity. I did a stint in United Pentecostal Church, all very similar in their basis and principles, but there are theological differences.
Did you guys move around
them.
a lot from like cities, or you were located in one area?
Located in one area in Houston, but he would be like the guest speaker, an evangelist that comes to like get the congregation very excited about something or talk about mission work or what he was involved in. He was a cop and a military man, and he had a focus on street evangelism, teaching at-risk youth, gangsters, kids that were...
Oh, that's like life in Texas. No, it's like football and God. And I don't know if you guys watch... if your father was a football guy, but definitely had the God thing. He was very into this.
Yes.
So what was the family dynamic? Any siblings?
I am the oldest of 5. My parents were divorced. I was with my mother part-time, my father part-time. With my mother, it was a mainstream evangelical Assemblies of God church that, as I grew into a teenager, they morphed into more of a messianic, is what it's called, and they had a focus more on Jewish evangelism. My father was more of a typical Assemblies of God, not so focused on only the Jews, but the whole world, exposed to both.
So what did that look like for you as a kid? I mean, growing up into this, you were all in? You thought
I loved it. From birth, you're put to bed with stories about Jesus and the Bible. You say your prayers and you are taught that this figure Jesus is with you all day, every day. I would wake up in the morning, praying to him. He was with me my whole day, very close. I thought he was orchestrating everything in my life. It was a very close relationship, and it was a safe place for me. I felt at home in the church. I really took to it and loved it. I dedicated my life to it. I learned as much as I could. As a teenager, I felt it was very easy to share with my peers and invite them to church. And I felt I was succeeding. I felt like I had a mission and that God was using me. I was like being used as a vessel to spread the gospel, and I was successful in it. And I loved it.
So how much, I guess, of you doing these missions would you say is focused on, okay, the Jews, that's who we gotta like really go after and bring around? I know you mentioned your mother was focused on what do you call it, Jewish evangelical, just bringing the Jews to Christianity. How much of that was that your focus?
When I was older, when I became an adult, that became a big focus. I myself joined a different Messianic congregation who had a huge focus on Israel and evangelizing Jews, and actually took a lot of training, because the type of evangelism that I had learned with my father and in the regular evangelical church was a world focus. And the appeal in that way was that we're all sinners. None of us are perfect, and there's just no way that we can stand before a holy God in our sinful and blemished state. So there has to be something that allows us to connect to God, because we're not worthy. But with Jesus as the ultimate sacrifice, we have forgiveness for sin. And if my sins are forgiven, that allows me to have a relationship with God. And so that relationship with Jesus and him as the intermediary, that was my connection to God.
And I guess what's like you were privy to the playbook, sort of what evangelical Christians would do to get Jews in Israel, or Jews really anywhere, I imagine, to, over to their side of things. What were some of those things that you said you trained? What were some of those things that you learned to do?
From typical evangelizing to specifically the Jewish people, it was very much about language. You didn't want to offend a Jew. I have a training manual if you want me to show it.
The training manual of how to
Yes.
How do I even say it?
How to evangelize Jews, how to bring them,
Jews.
or how to bring them to Jesus.
Yeah, can I see that?
Yeah.
I'd love to see this. I mean, I wouldn't love to see it,
Oops,
but...
Did I drop something?
That's okay, I'll grab that. How to share the Messiah.
That is put out by the Messianic movement. It is filled with all kinds of useful information about Jewish people, about the Jewish culture, their beliefs, what not to say to a Jew, and most importantly, how to bring up topics that would lead you into a discussion about the Messiah. Mm. In the middle of that, you will find a handy little card.
Yeah. This is really interesting. They give this out to who exactly? Anybody?
It's part of the training material on how to reach Jewish people. And
this is given to anyone who comes to this church? Anyone who wants to even... Yeah?
Pretty much. We were all taught how to.
Yeah.
Do you see the card in there?
I don't see a card, but it could be that's what fell, no? But I do see you must make him want what you and others have. You must clearly explain the plan of atonement in the Messiah. You must ask him to pray to invite the Messiah into his heart and life. You must follow up with him. It's right. Pretty, it's like pretty aggressive.
It is. In their eyes, every Jew is going to hell. And
every Jew or everyone besides for evangelicals? Is it
everyone
only Jews?
Who doesn't believe in Jesus is going to hell.
So what's the obsession with trying to save the Jew?
Can I go back to this?
Yeah, sure, totally.
This is in the middle of that. It's a Messianic soul winners card. I would take it around with me just in case I encounter a Jew.
Can I see that?
Because the language when speaking to a Jew is so important, because let's face it, when Jews hear the name Jesus Christ, it doesn't invoke warm and friendly feelings. It says over inside.
Here, for those who don't see it, it says, don't say Jesus, don't say convert, a Christian, come to church, New Testament, cross. Don't say those words.
Right.
And you do say Messiah, Yeshua.
Right. Use his Hebrew name because that sounds more Jewish than Jesus. And don't say. But I would say
there's still some stuff here that would raise a red flag in the do say.
Right.
I'm sure in retrospect, now that you're Jewish, you understand that. Like if someone said a Bible believers, like that's.
Well, if somebody invited you to church, you'd say, whoa, no. And you say, hey, we're having a meeting in my house of Bible believers. That sounds a little nicer.
Yeah, but like if they want to take you the next step, it could be like shul.
Right. Well, you're from the frum world, so it would raise flags for you. But there are many less affiliated Jews who that would not raise red flags.
Are there still, I'm sure there are, but how many people are walking around with this right now in the world?
A lot. 70 million?
70 million makes
70
more sense.
million evangelicals in the world.
70 million evangelicals, and they're walking around with this. So this is like a
not walking around with that specific card,
but this info,
that idea, especially the Messianic movement, especially ones that are dedicated to Jewish evangelism. And they don't see it as deceptive. They see it as this is a culturally sensitive way of presenting the gospel to a Jewish person.
This is intense. This is like serious. How successful would you say evangelicals are in their mission to convert Jews to Christianity?
I'll tell you, I used this method myself, and I unfortunately succeeded. And today that makes me very sad. I regret that very much. I'll tell you, when I moved to Israel, mostly I'm focused on the Messianic world and what's operating in Israel, because that's, even in America, that's eventually their focus. They walk out the door and you're surrounded by Jews. You don't have to go seek them out.
Yeah.
When I moved to Israel in 2015, I didn't want to be known as a convert. I kept the work that I did private. I did it behind the scenes. I wanted my kids to be accepted as any other Jew.
Right.
So I kept that
to
myself. But when I moved to Israel, the statistics was 15,000 Jews who accepted Jesus and were living in Israel. There were over 100 Messianic synagogues and organizations operating in Israel. In 2020, when COVID hit, I looked at the statistics again, and they had grown, like doubled.
So 30,000.
30,000, between 30 and 40,000 Jews that believe in Jesus are now in Israel. There was more than 300 Messianic congregations and organizations operating. And now we have a huge focus on media and online resources. There are more than 200 Israeli-based websites that are dedicated solely to evangelizing Jews. I think if you look at your Facebook, if you look at your feed, Jews are bombarded with missionary materials, and they specifically put in those tags so that any Jewish person, anybody from Israel, anybody with any Jewish affiliation at all, is a target.
Right. And I'm gonna get back to that, but I want to, I guess, go to the point when you're maybe a teenager that you started to feel that this isn't so much at what point did you start straying away from this thing that you grew up in? It was your safe place.
I'll tell you, I didn't want to stray away from it. I knew I was right and everybody else was wrong, particularly my denomination. And I wanted to see Jews saved, and I was successful in the less affiliated versions of Judaism. I joined the JCC. I took Ulpan courses, Israeli dance.
To try to enmesh yourself?
All to meet Jewish people. I needed FaceTime. I volunteered.
How old were you when that was happening?
I was in my mid-20s.
And this is where exactly? This is in
Houston, Texas.
In Houston. So you're trying to sort of enmesh yourself in the Jewish community in Houston.
Yes.
To try to convert them.
Right. I would volunteer for events. They came to depend on me, and I wouldn't just volunteer in any position. I made sure I was a greeter. of some sort. So I had real FaceTime with Jewish people. I delivered Meals on Wheels to elderly. You'd be surprised how easy it is to share the gospel with somebody who's so lonely that they'll talk about anything. Yeah. Just spend a few minutes with me.
It seems like you hold on to some sort of guilt over that part of your life.
I do.
The fact that
because now looking back, it wasn't culturally sensitive. It was downright deceptive, and I hurt for those souls that I feel responsible.
Do you know how many there are?
I don't, and I think it's impossible to know that, because you never know the little things that you do, what an impact that makes. The JCC got to know me. Actually, they didn't know it was me, but they were upset about the tracts that would show up in the bathrooms. Right. And I found more deceptive ways. And you unroll the toilet paper a little bit, put them inside, and then roll it up. And they didn't know where that was coming from, but it was upsetting to them. I have no idea how many of those reached people and what an impact that made.
If you could speak to maybe a few of those people that perhaps were impacted by your actions when you were younger, and now here you are sitting here as a Jew, what would you want them to know?
That it's deceptive, and that I wholeheartedly believed it. And that goes into how I came to where I am. It was mistranslated verses. It was things that were taken out of context. I didn't intend to take this path. I'm shocked at the turn my life made. I never expected to be here. I never expected to be speaking to Jewish audiences, especially about this. Yeah. I wanted to be a better evangelist. I wanted to be able to be better at reaching Jewish people. And I threw myself completely into being the best missionary I could and bringing as many Jews as I could. And my problem came about when I reached out to the Orthodox world. I was obsessed with the Orthodox world. I watched them from a distance.
Oh, really?
And I
Specifically in Houston?
Yes. I thought, from the outside looking in, some of the things in the frum world just are outrageous, and you can't imagine what people think. Just the rituals and traditions that we do. We have a blessing that we say for just about everything. The way we carry ourselves, the way we dress. It's
put on our shoes, right foot, left foot. Yeah.
Right. Some of the there are things that have got to look really strange to the outside world, and they did. But I was fascinated by it and thought, wow, it's like God is central in their life, and every little thing they do is focused somehow on some ritual of the Jewish faith. And at the same time, I was taught to believe that Jews don't have a relationship with God. They don't have a real relationship with God because you can't without the forgiveness of sin, and you reject Jesus. So, all of these rituals and traditions you do mean nothing,
right? Because
you can't have a relationship with God like that.
So you started really poking your head within the Orthodox world. You got obsessed with it. What happened? What happened at that point?
I couldn't think of anything more beautiful than taking somebody who was so committed
to orthodoxy,
an Orthodox Jew that was religious, to introduce him to his Jewish Messiah. That was a huge accomplishment for me.
Which in your mind was Jesus?
The biggest mitzvah for me. Turns out they didn't think so.
So what was Orthodox Jews are stubborn.
They are.
I don't know what it takes a lot probably. You can't even sell an Orthodox Jew solar. You're not going to sell them Christianity. It's really difficult. Right. What was your experience?
You probably know quite a few Jews who get excited when they see a missionary.
Gabriel Sanders.
Yeah.
Tivia Singer.
Right. Or even just in the Jewish world.
I've had missionaries come to my door over here. They knock on my.
Do you get excited?
I get my blood gets pumping. I was actually it wasn't even in person. They came on my camera. I think they were Jehovah's Witnesses. Mm-hmm. So they ring my doorbell and they're like, I'm like, hey, I was like talking to the ring. They're like, hey, they're like, hi, we're Jehovah's Witnesses, sir. I'm like, okay. They're like, we'd love to talk to you. I'm like, I'm Jewish.
Right.
They're like, okay. I'm like, have a great day. But it does. I think, yeah, every Jew's dream is to go face to face, toe to toe with a missionary.
Right. We love to argue.
Yeah. That's why law school is full of Jews, I guess. I don't know.
So I definitely encountered some of those Jews that love to mess with missionaries.
And look what happened to you.
they would dabble in the counter-missionary world, so they kind of knew the arguments and they were ready for me. And they would tell me things like, those verses are out of context and that's a mistranslation.
Do you remember a specific verse? I'm just curious, like which verse would you go with? Like, this is your moment. And they're like, no, it doesn't mean that. Do you remember any of them?
Isaiah 53 is the big one that most people use. If you read it, just the first part of Isaiah 53, it says he was broken for us. He was bruised. He was pierced for our transgressions. Alone, it sounds like it's speaking about Jesus.
Right. And then how would they turn that around to you? Meaning, what would the Orthodox Jew, how would they dispute that or refute it?
They'd laugh. They'd say it was talking about Israel. It was tell me that it was out of context. There are certain things that are mistranslated, which I thought was absolutely absurd. And I would come back to them and say, you're just regurgitating what your rabbi tells you. And I'd challenge them, just look at it yourself and make your own decision. And I didn't get very far with those Jews. But I thought, just like I learned to change the language to make it more palatable for a Jew to accept, I'm going to have to do the same thing in the Orthodox world to reach these types of Jews.
You have to take these notes and even change it even more.
So when they came at me with an argument that it was mistranslated, I said, you know what, I'm going to go learn the Hebrew of that verse. And when they say it's out of context, I'm going to not just quote that one verse. I'm going to go back and I'm going to learn the whole chapter. I'm going to learn the whole book if I have to, so that I could present this, in context like they want.
You started learning Torah.
I did. And against the advice of my church.
You ever think about why they advised against it?
Yes, I'll tell you that. They told me not to do it and that it was not the direction to take. But I thought, faith that can't be questioned or challenged, what good is that? I mean, I'm up to the challenge. I am strong in my faith. There's no way I'm letting go of this. And I know I'm right and they're wrong. And I'm going to succeed in this.
You're like, there's no way that you're going to get sucked into this.
No, my faith was solid.
Right.
I knew I was right. So I took that challenge and I learned from rabbis who understood the text and explained it. And I went through it and it was disturbing.
This is all still in Houston?
Still in Houston.
Like Orthodox rabbis?
Yes.
Online, in person?
Online. And then I think I got upset enough.
Who did you watch online?
Not online as much. It was a tape series at the time. It was a while back. Rabbi Tovia Singer. He had a tape series at the time. And I thought, when I came upon this tape set, I thought I found a gold mine. All I have to do is tear apart this rabbi, because Orthodox people listen to their rabbis. So if I can discredit this rabbi and I could tear apart his arguments, then I'll succeed. So I set out to do that. I wasn't questioning. I again, knew I was right. I just needed to counter him.
So how'd that go? What was that process like? Have you start listening to these tapes?
His biggest challenge is, don't just take my word for it. Don't take anybody's word for it. Look it up yourself. Look at the text, read it in context, look at the translations, do the work yourself. Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
Right.
And I took him up on that challenge, and my world fell apart. And I began to understand why the church leaders advised me against it, because I could not control the cracks that appeared. It was an atomic bomb in my life. Those verses that I was using to bring Jews to Jesus were in fact mistranslated. They were out of context and at times even just absolutely made up.
Do you think that this is being done? Like, do the heads of this movement know that? And this is just one big scam? Meaning, do they know that there are cracks?
And there's different, I don't want to like blanket that. I know that a lot of them do know. I do know that a lot of them can't possibly look at it and not see it, but they're the leaders and they're invested. A lot of money is involved, their ego and position. But I would say the followers of those movements are very sincere people. They're loving people. They just want a connection with God, just like I did.
Could you search how many evangelicals are in the world? I'm just really curious. So slowly but surely, it's really chipping away at you, what you're learning.
Yes. Actually, not slowly. It unraveled very quickly. And I was taught that the Bible was like an absolutely divine word of God, and that it was, absolute truth. So to find out that my Bible had been messed with, that mistranslated, things taken out of context. And I went through memorizing every single prophecy that I knew was fulfilled by Jesus and proved that he was the Messiah. And every single one of them was mistranslated, taken out of context. Didn't it all mean what it was, what I was taught that it meant? And the betrayal in that was huge. If you were to do that with a legal document, you'd be in prison. So to know that they did that to my Bible that I held so
and they're doing it
dear.
To how many people, Nissa? 386 million evangelical Christians in the world.
Worldwide.
So they're doing that to 386 million people.
Right.
That are drinking the Kool-Aid that's been tampered with.
And they have no idea.
Well, they're about to find out, I guess, if they watch this.
If they watch this.
Well, I'm sure, but there are a lot of anti-missionary work that goes on. So they are exposed to things like that, like you are saying. You're not the first person to have been a missionary and then left the fold. Right. What is something that they will watch this and counteract it with? Like, what's the response?
I think the first knee-jerk reaction is you never had a relationship with Jesus to begin with, or you'd have never left.
Then what do you say to that? You did.
I think anybody who really knows my story and knew my involvement can't question. I was absolutely all in. I had no intention of taking this route. And I think it's very interesting when you hear testimonies, if you were to go into a church and hear testimonies about how Christians find Jesus, if you hear, unfortunately, we live in a time where we all know a friend, a family member who has converted to Christianity. If you were to ask how that happened, it's not through the work of an evangelical, a professional missionary. It's through a personal interaction with a friend. When you hear the Christian's testimony of how they reached Jesus, it's always a low point. They reached an absolute low point in their life. They were in drugs, in alcohol. They were in a ditch, covered in their own vomit or some horrible situation where they were vulnerable and somebody reached them. Or sometimes you'll hear that, Jesus appeared to them, and it was a personal experience. And the opposite, when you hear stories about a Jewish convert that came out of Christianity, I thought I was at the top of my game, and most of them do. And it's really struggling with the text and making it work. It's more of an intellectual, wow, this doesn't make sense. Yeah. And in Christianity, you're not allowed to question. To question is a sign of that you lack faith, and blind faith is like the ultimate.
That's like really the opposite in Judaism, like
absolute opposite, which I love.
Yeah.
We question everything. The entire Gemara is questions and arguing out the tiniest minute detail, and our struggle with God. Abraham struggled with God. Moshe argued with God and struggled. Job demanded, justice and I want answers. That struggle is everything. And we dedicate our life to learning and working through those struggles to really understand. And to me, rather than just blindly loving and accepting something, to me, really struggling to understand and dedicated to learning is much more of a deeper, real relationship with God than what I had. I feel half my life I was robbed of that intimate, close relationship with God, which I thought I had. I thought I had it and the Jews didn't. And come to find out, the Jews were the one with the direct connection and they never let it go.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine a lot of people in your situation maybe would have started learning the text, learning about the Torah as an attempt to be a better evangelical, see that there are cracks and just be like, I'm out. Like, I'm not dealing with any of this. But your reaction was very sincere. You're like, wait, if they're right, then I'm going to pursue that. How come you went that path? How come you decided to convert to Judaism?
There's more to it than just understanding the text. And when I went to my pastor, when I went to leaders, the people who were teaching me, when I went to them with my questions and they couldn't answer them, I was hit back with, you just lack faith. It doesn't have to make sense. Just believe. It's more than just understanding the text. It was a relationship. I told you from a young child, Jesus was with me all day, every day. It was somebody who was a part of me. So the severing of that relationship was traumatic. It was like losing a spouse, a significant other. He was very close to me, and I thought it was very real to imagine, to understand and realize that, wow, that was just an imaginary friend.
That you had
that
spent
was devastating.
20 plus years on.
Right. So even when somebody's looking at the text and say, okay, that doesn't make sense and I'm not understanding it, but that relationship with Jesus and the sense of community that you have in the church and the support system that you have, it's very close. We have the same thing in the Jewish community.
Yeah.
It's not easy to leave. So when things don't make sense, you're not so willing to listen and pursue it further.
So tell me about that process of you wanting to leave in your heart and then you actually leaving. Like, what did that look like practically at that time?
That was probably the most difficult. I didn't know anything but the church and the community and the support system I had there. I had family that I knew, church family that was like family to me, that I knew that those relationships were indestructible. So nothing I could ever do would lose that. So when I started with this searching and this crisis of faith, I shared it with some of the people that were closest in my circle and shared what I was looking at. And I thought that they'd be understanding and help me work through it. But they were less understanding than I thought they would be. All that mattered was that I was rejecting Jesus, and that was a problem. And it didn't take long before word got around of what I was looking at and the struggle I was having. And the pastor of the church sent out a memo to the entire congregation. He included some New Testament verses. One who denies Christ is the Antichrist. In Christianity, that basically meant I was the devil. There's a difference between you and me, a Jew who doesn't accept Jesus. It's just because he doesn't know any better. And with enough patience and perseverance from a Christian, eventually you can be saved. But somebody who knew Jesus and rejected him, that's an apostate. And there's no redemption for somebody like that.
Were you scared for your life at that point?
I was mostly sad. He also included a verse in the New Testament says that one who denies Christ, you're not to open the door to them. You're not to invite them into your home or
So
have
all your
them sit at your table.
Your family.
I was telling people, look, I'm just taking a different route. I may not go to church. I may do something else, but we can still be friends and we can still get together for coffee. But that was not the case. It was just outright rejection. So I felt very, very alone, humiliated. It was a serious crisis.
What was your immediate families? Your mother, your father, your siblings. What was their reaction?
That was more difficult. They they had no idea what I was going through in leaving the Messianic church. And I had started going to a conservative Jewish synagogue. I hid it from my family for a long time. They thought that I was attending Jewish events and Jewish services as part of my evangelizing and infiltrating the community.
They didn't see that memo that the...
No, I was in a church on my own. I was
okay,
an
you're living
adult.
on your own at that point. Yeah.
I was an adult and living on my own. As I was a single mom. I didn't bring up faith anymore. When they came to my house, I turned books backward. Anything that had Hebrew, I hid it, because going through what I went through with friends and a church family, the last thing I wanted to do was to tell my parents. I respected them very much, and I didn't want to disappoint them or for them to somehow feel like I was dishonoring them in some way. So I hid it for a long time. But there was one Friday night that I will never forget. I was attending a conservative service, and during the service, I had my phone off. But when I came out, I got a message from my father and said, I need to stay at your house. I have a meeting in the morning. I'm coming over. And I had been studying that whole day. I had every translation laid out on the table. I had, Rabbi Singer's book there. All of my notes were out. I didn't have time to put them away. And I was terrified. Everything I did not want him to know was going to be the first thing he saw when he walked into my house. So it was fear. I wasn't sure, do I rush home quickly to try to put it away before he gets there? Or do I take my time and try to process, how am I going to explain myself? And sure enough, he was there before me. And when I walked in, he was sitting at the table going through all of my things. When he called me over to sit next to him, I felt like a 5-year-old child ready to get a lecture. And he said, I see what you're looking at. I understand this. I told you he was a military man. He went into law enforcement, became a detective. He said, you changed the way you dress. You changed the way you eat. I've seen this before. You're getting involved in a cult. He told me we're going to learn together and we're going to get through this, and I'm going to bring you out. I tried to tell him that's not the case. I really I have a lot of questions I'm trying to work through, and a lot of things that are not coming together. So we went through a few of them, and I think he was surprised he didn't know the answer right away either. But he knew absolutely I was reaching the wrong conclusions, and he said, we're going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to help you. I'll look at this, and we'll meet back. And we'll go through this together. The series I gave him to look at was 24 audios, I think. I thought that was going to buy me at least a week before we would have to broach the subject again. And then I'd prepare myself for more answers. He went into the guest bedroom, and right away he started listening to those tapes. So I did not sleep, because in the next room, I was hearing that rabbi's voice playing all night long. And I was intensely listening. Every time that rabbi reached an important point, I'd freeze and I'd listen, and I'd hear him stop the tape, and I'd hear the flipping of pages. And I was like, is he getting it? Did he get through? Is he angry? Is he going to be mad? I was on pins and needles as he was listening. But at 3:00 in the morning, he knocked on my door and said, are you awake? I said, yeah. And he came and he sat on the edge of my bed, and he was quiet. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what he had to say. And then it got scary. He sat there in this catatonic state, just staring at the wall. And I said, Daddy, are you okay? And he said, that rabbi, he's right. And I looked up every reference. The Jews, they're right. He said, the rug's been pulled out from under me, and I don't know what to do. And he looked at me and said, what do we do now?
Wow.
And I said, Daddy, that's where I'm at. I don't know. I think me and my children, I want to convert to Judaism. I want them to learn, and I want them to be part of a community. But beyond that, I don't know. I'm learning. I'm trying to learn Torah without my Jesus filter, and I'm finding it to be beautiful. All of those rituals and traditions that I thought were so empty, I learned the meaning and the traditions behind them, and they're so beautiful. It just made me want to learn more and do more. So I took that route, which was also not easy. That thing of being rejected 3 times, I think they did that a lot more. That wasn't fair.
Yeah.
But it was a difficult road that we got through.
Your father?
My father left Christianity. He's no longer a minister. He did tell me, he said, I just want the membership card. But he said, but to learn a whole new language, a new culture, a new religion, that's too hard. It's enough to put away what I know and say I no longer subscribe to that. But it's a little too hard for me. He identifies himself as a Ben Noach. He's very supportive of me. I do yearly conferences in Texas. He attends.
That's wild.
He connects to the Noachide world. And it's great.
I did not see that coming.
Me neither. It was a surprise to me too.
Like there's gotta be, we're gonna make a movie one day about this, no? Podcast is cool, but like, wow, like he's sitting there and the last thing you probably thought he was gonna say is, they're right.
Right.
Wow. So the conversion of you and your kids? Yeah. Brutal, no?
It's not an easy process. And I think every convert will tell you that they had struggles. And I think Hashem designed it that way.
Yeah.
The Jews had to get through Mitzrayim, and they had all kinds of struggles. We've had, centuries of persecution.
So you're saying the convert has to feel a little bit of an ounce of that just in order to buy in.
They do. I don't always think that it needs to come from the Jewish people. I think Hashem orchestrates struggles and hurdles that a convert has to get through. And I think he individualizes it. But I think you'll hear every convert has a difficult time. In the end, they really deserve and earn their place in the Jewish community. They go through their own Mitzrayim.
It's interesting that you started out by going to a conservative synagogue when you were so infatuated by the Orthodox world. Why do you think you did that?
Because I started out in places like the JCC.
Right.
And that was the community that I knew. And that was where I had friends. And that was where I was successful and was invited. It was a very social type environment. But when it came to really learning and wanting to learn Parsha, and that was the Orthodox world. But I was not so accepted in the Orthodox world. The Orthodox world has more barriers to get through.
I'm sure they were also skeptical, like, well, you were an evangelical. How do we know you're not trying to just enmesh yourself in our Orthodox community? I mean, like, we've seen that. We'll get to that about Beinenu's work, but like, we've seen time and time again of people who have masked to be Orthodox Jews just to do their mission.
Right. I was on a very honest search, and I was very open, which wasn't so well accepted when I first started the conversion. I walked into a Chabad house late at night on a Friday night. I saw the light on and went in there, and I explained exactly where I was from and my life. I said, I want to convert to Judaism. And he says, you can't do that. He says, everybody has their place. You have your place, and you can't be a Jew any more than I can be a woman. And to just accept your place. And I left pretty disappointed, but I didn't give up. I went back again and again. I researched my family. I found some Jewish roots in my family. I went back to that Chabad rabbi and said, could you help me at least learn about the Jewish people in my family? Do you have connections to help me research who my great-grandmother is? She's in a Jewish cemetery. And I didn't know it, but that sort of changed things in his mind for me. And he said, while you're researching your background, I'll let you attend a class. Not like services, but we have a weekly Parsha class, and you can come to this lunch and learn.
Is it in Houston still?
In Houston. And it was very interesting. My first class was Parshas Yitro. And,
That's great.
Right, which I thought was very significant. And then from there, kept learning. I still kept pushing, and I was still getting pushed back. And he had a meeting with me with all kinds of information about the B'nai Noach and righteous Gentiles, and that this is my place, and information about what the 7 laws, Noachide laws are. And I said, this is great for my father, but it's not enough for me, and I'm going to continue this. I want this for my children. I sat at a Shabbos table, and I thought I knew the Bible, and I thought Jews didn't know the Bible, but I was blown away by, the 5-6-year-old kids at the Shabbos table, and they bring their Devar Torah that they learned at school, and the depth of that at 5 years old, it just blew me away. I want that. I want that for my children. Shabbos, we don't realize how connected and almost trapped to our connections, to put that away and have a day of just family and connection and connecting to God is beautiful. And you don't understand Shabbos until you actually do it. I thought, oh my gosh, this is like so many restrictions. This is going to be hard, but I don't see them as restrictions anymore. It's like the ultimate freedom. What I thought was restrictions and just rituals that the Jews are bound by, and how sad that is, and you can only keep kosher. I find freedom in that also. Every mitzvah I see as an opportunity to kiss Hashem and to thank him for everything. I'm no longer focused, which is what I was taught, that this world doesn't matter. It's the world to come that matters. And Judaism is the opposite. Every mitzvah we do makes a difference in the world. We make a tikkun. Every tzedakah we do makes a difference and improves the world, and has so much more meaning and depth to me.
So where did you end up converting?
I did a 4-year process in Houston. And at the end of that 4-year process, I ended up having the privilege to go to Israel and complete my conversion there.
Like B'nai Brak?
No, in Ilon Shvut. I had a complicated case.
I feel like they all are, no? I've interviewed people who like Ayelet El Nakave. She converted like 3 times because
Unfortunately, yeah, I think we need to get our act together in that area.
I've heard of like a smooth conversion.
Right. I did go through a conservative conversion, and then I did the conversion in Israel, which was amazing. But it was an ad hoc Beit Din, they say. So even though that they were high caliber rabbis that nobody would question, for the Aliyah process, I had to do another conversion in New York. So
by a Bezdin here in New York.
Right. So I've also had 3 conversions.
It's like passing the bar. You have to pass the bar here, you have to pass the bar there.
Right. So I'm triple hexured.
3 vaccines. That's amazing. Wow. That's like really cool. That's and your children. How old were they through this?
Thank God they were young when I started. My daughter was almost 10, so I guess
This is not too long ago, no? How many years?
Time has flown so much. I began my journey in 2005. I finished my conversion in 2009. Mm-hmm. So it's been a long time.
And you've lived in Israel ever since?
I lived in Israel for the last 10 years.
Okay. So, I mean, you moved back to Houston for a little bit? I mean, after you converted in Israel?
After I converted in Israel, I came back to Houston. Mm-hmm. And then within a year, I ended up getting married. We went to Hebron to get married. My husband's whole family is in Israel.
Oh, that's so nice.
And then moved back to Houston. He's a doctor here. He travels back and forth.
What was that decision like to make Aliyah?
I can't explain the feeling of Israel being home because it's so foreign in every way. The culture is different. It's much more harsh. The language is different. Just about everything is different. And I'm a Texas girl. I never left the state of Texas. Texas was definitely my home. Texas, unlike anywhere else, you have a lot of pride.
Zero between Israel and Texas.
No. But somehow when I came to Israel, it felt like home. And when you land in Israel, I don't know, I felt like my soul just woke up and stood up when I got to Israel. It felt like home, which is strange. I always say it's physically harder in Israel, but it's spiritually easier. And I feel a real difference in Israel. I think it's because we're so at the source.
Yeah.
Coming back to America, it feels very strange, almost plastic. Like the spiritual connection is just so much stronger there.
So to go full circle, just in the beginning of this conversation, I was reading the training manual of how to share the Messiah and how to be an evangelical. And somewhere along the way, you started an organization, Bieniנו,
Yes.
which is sort of to prevent the pitfalls that Jews are falling into. You had mentioned 30,000 of 2020 in Israel had converted to Christianity. So that is a serious issue. Talk to me about starting Bieniנו, what your intention was, and some of the work that you're involved in.
From the very beginning, I was right away involved in the counter-missionary world. I first started out working with Rabbi Singer for a few years. He was in Muncie and then in Israel. So I was like running the local office, and at the time, hand mailing out all of the books and tapes and things. I had a lot of connection with people who were leaving the church. I loved that. And then I got involved in an organization, Jewish Israel, still wanting to be behind the scenes and not wanting to be looked at as the convert. Infiltration in the opposite direction was needed, because in Israel, there are a lot of partnerships being formed with evangelical organizations that I knew were like some of the biggest evangelists I knew. Some of the like most wanted, most dangerous missionaries were just being fully embraced by the Jewish world. And I didn't understand it, but I came to understand it because they present themselves very differently to a Jew than they do behind the doors in the church. So I used to go into the churches and get the materials, take the tapes, take the videos, and privately behind the scenes, I would give it to the Israeli organization, a counter-missionary organization, and say, the Jewish leaders who are forming partnerships with this evangelical group need to see this, because behind the doors, they're talking about how they're doing it, that they're giving charity, that they're hand delivering groceries to poor people, and they're sharing the gospel. And they talk about it very openly in the church, and they boast about their successes and how many people have come to Jesus and that. And the Jewish leaders were fully embracing them because they were totally unaware of that. So privately, I would get that information to them. And it wasn't until COVID that I reviewed those statistics, like everybody trapped in our home, not able to do anything or go anywhere. I decided to learn video editing, and I gave my first shot at editing a video. I said, for 6 months, I've been trying to warn journalists about this TV station that's coming to Israel. It was God TV.
Yeah.
And in newsletters that I was getting, they were boasting that they had gotten a license to broadcast the gospel in Hebrew in the land of Israel. And the gospel was going to be going out in every Jewish home. And they were going to bring 90 million Jews to Jesus.
Wow.
And that was absurd to me. So I tried to share it with media, and I wasn't getting any traction. I thought, does just nobody care? So I took a fundraising video from the CEO of God TV, who was boasting about how they were going to save 90 million Jews and that they had gotten the right to broadcast. And I took the most shocking statements that he made, and I put it together in a little 5-minute clip. And I put it up on my personal YouTube channel that had like 3 subscribers. And overnight, it went viral, and it upset the entire Jewish world. I was surprised, and Haaretz covered it on the front page, and then the Jerusalem Post, and then there were Knesset members who stood up and said, absolutely not, we're fighting this. There was court proceedings that took place, and then there was headlines of, God TV is going to be forbidden to be broadcast in Israel. The Christian world was shocked and claimed that it was persecution. It made worldwide news in every language. I took down my YouTube channel and right away started a new organization and said, I don't want to be the face behind that. So I started Bineinu, and I thought, you know what, this is a new direction. I had been behind the scenes fighting this and getting information, but we live in a world where video has much more impact. And it's not just me saying, look, guys, this is their agenda. I know because I've been there. It was in their own words, and they hear it themselves out of their own mouths and hear the agenda. And that's shocking. And that was what was needed. So I took a new direction and said, you know, that's what works.
You're going to shine the light.
They need to hear it from their own voices, not from me. So I started that route. And then in that, there were several cases, one right after another, of shocking infiltrations into the Jewish world.
And there's more of this that goes on. This is just one example.
Yes, that's just one example. There are other horrible stories and ones that have not given up, and we continue to follow them.
There's also stuff that happens that, like, we kind of, you know, as a frum community, we're very, our guard is up to this stuff. So like at the beginning of this war, you had like these cowboys that went to Israel, and everyone's sharing the video, these evangelical Christian cowboys that are going to keep the crops good in Israel and help the farmers. And none of us are really sure, like, is this good? Is it bad? Are they evil? Are they just trying to help Israel? What should be our guard level when it comes to this type of behavior?
I think the onus is on us and on Jewish leaders. It's very easy to point the finger and say they're the bad guys. I was a Christian myself. I don't feel I was evil. I still have much of my family in the church. I don't think they're evil. It doesn't come from an evil place. It's very sincere and loving. They do want to help.
Yeah, but I mean, this story from French Hill, there's nothing loving about making up a story that her grandmother was a Holocaust survivor. Like, that's extremely deceptive,
that's deceptive
and evil. That is evil. That is evil.
But when it comes to evangelical support for Israel and them coming and wanting to work and do things, it does come from a sincere place. It's complicated. It's not black and white. It's controversial. I'm not a rabbi to say what can and can't be done. There are extremes. There are people who say they shouldn't be allowed in Israel at all. We can't accept a dime from them. And then there are the other extreme of fully embracing and taking all of the money and kumbaya joint Jewish Christian events, and we're all best friends. I'm sort of in the middle, in my opinion, if it matters at all. I think there are opportunities and ways that rather than challenging that support, we can channel that support. I do think that evangelicals should not be direct providers of support. They should not be the ones delivering Meals on Wheels or giving the groceries to vulnerable people. I think there needs to be a filtering process. But again, it's much harder to hold up the mirror to ourselves and say, you know, what did we do to get here? But by giving access, we're putting vulnerable people at risk. And
so it's
complicated.
What could the frum community do better when it comes to this?
Boundaries on how those interactions should take place. I subscribe mostly to Rav Soloveitchik's point of view on this, which is interfaith dialogue is necessary on certain levels for social, political, economic things. It's definitely necessary, and we should engage in those interfaith discussions for those reasons, to help improve the world, to help better things. But when it comes to theological things, I think that's a line that we shouldn't cross. I think there's so much that we share, and these joint Bible studies between Jews and Christians, I think there's a danger in that. But the evangelical world and non-Jews as a whole, there's so much that they can offer and do. I know there's thousands that march to Washington and advocate for legislation changes. We have a huge issue with anti-Semitism. We need strong advocates, that aren't biased. A Jew fighting anti-Semitism is, that's a given. We need more voices to help stand with us and support us. But we have to draw a line when it comes to proselytizing, when it comes to converting our people. We have to say, that's a boundary we can't allow you to cross.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. This has been extremely eye-opening, and I hope it really brings out how important this message is, and the work that you're doing at Bineinu is crucial, because we can't lose any more Jews
No.
to the church. We can't do it. It's 2025 now. Thank God things have developed, and we need to be way more careful, it seems. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you so much.
Hashem